Welcome. We hope this broadcast finds you healthy and safe. Thank you for tuning into MSK's video pop-up series, where we discuss late-breaking news and issues that affect your business during these uncertain times. Today, we'll be hearing from Sue Ross, partner and head of MSK's privacy practice, along with Tim Carter, associate in that same group. As companies prepare to reopen, there are mounting questions on a wide range of topics. Today, Sue and Tim will discuss the complexities involved in contact tracing as companies prepare to reopen and the balancing act between safety and various privacy issues that arise. Now, over to you, Sue and Tim.
Thanks, Doug. Good afternoon, good morning, hello, whatever your time zone might be. He's Tim, I'm Sue, in case you were in doubt. We are going to, as Doug said, talk about contact tracing. For those of you not familiar with the term of art, what it basically means is public health officials trying to sort out who was exposed to a disease, who patient one is, as they're sometimes referred to, and also ways in which to try to minimize, in this case, obviously, the COVID virus. I'm going to talk about it from the perspective of things that employers are likely to do, and then Tim's going to talk a little bit about some of the other related issues. So let me start by saying that contact tracing in its simplest terms is where you attempt to trace who's been exposed to the disease and hope to minimize the disease, but also to understand how it has spread. For most of us, if we've run into the term at all, we've heard it in the context of maybe the AIDS crisis, if we're old enough, the Ebola, H1N1, SARS. There have been a number of situations where the contact tracing has been employed. For all of us, this is really the first time for most of us that we're going to see it being used by our employers. Most often what's going to happen is either someone that you work with or someone that you know has been either exposed to the disease or come down with it. In the workplace, the most likely scenario is somebody came into work, they came down with the symptoms, they have left because that's the procedure everybody is using. And sometime shortly thereafter, their employer, usually through someone who works in human resources, will be talking to the employee and asking them a set of questions that begin with something like, who have you been in contact with in the office for 10 minutes or longer over the 14 days prior to you displaying the symptoms? In some cases, I think it's the state of Louisiana, it's 15 minutes. But in most other places, it's 10. And the idea is, tell us who's been exposed so that we can help them. Now, for all of us, the key is that our employer is not permitted to identify who it is that's come down with the virus, unless that person gives permission, which can sometimes be a little bit dicey for the rest of us. But a lot of the folks we've talked to on a very informal basis have said, if I've come down with it, I just assume everybody know who it is so that they can protect themselves. But the idea will be that you will be asked, who did you talk to? Who did you spend time with? Whether it's casually because you were able to drop into their office or because you were in a meeting, or however it is that you may have exposed others. And then those other people will be asked who they've been in contact with. Again, the same basic set of parameters for 10 or 15 minutes over a continuous period of time going back those two weeks. That information then gets used, and in most cases, everybody that's been exposed will be asked to go home and self-isolate. Employers are doing things differently in terms of the conditions on which you'll be allowed or permitted or requested to come back to work. It varies between the idea of whether it would just be something where you'll go get tested or whether there'll be a requirement for a doctor's note or whatnot. But do keep in mind that all of this is considered to be medical information, is subject to the usual rules that employers face. That is that information has to be retained separate from the employment records, and it should be exposed only to those that have access to it on a need-to-know basis. Tim, I'm going to turn it over to you. Talk a little bit, if you would, as we've talked about the Apple-Google platform that's been launched, who's using it, and some of the other issues that I know we're all covering right now.
Sure. Thanks, Sue, for that great summary. So generally speaking, what I'm going to talk about is what's actually going on at the state, local health department level. So states and local health departments in their efforts to kind of get things going and reopening are essentially using contact tracing to try and basically break the chain of transmission and identifying the virus. How this is normally done, as Sue already kind of dove into, is generally through contact tracers, which those are often people who are essentially tasked with identifying everyone that a sick person was exposed or exposed to, and basically stopping the transmission at its source and trying to isolate those individuals. Understandably, this entails, in order to expand this onto a significant scale, statewide at least, and across the country, this requires the hiring of thousands of contact tracers. In fact, I actually just saw today that New Jersey had hired, I think as of today, 900 contact tracers. The process, as Sue already covered, is pretty straightforward, but one of the things that is actually interesting and notable is that what we have seen is kind of a rise in fraudulent contact tracers, which we actually just put out an alert yesterday about. The difficulty in kind of going about which ways contact tracers will notify individuals largely centers on kind of the differences on a state-by-state basis. So some states will notify people via phone call, some will actually text and notify them that they are going to be called by someone from their state and local health department prior to doing that. But the long and the short of it is basically that a legitimate contact tracer will never seek to kind of get any sort of financial information, social security information, credit card information, anything like that. But as a result of this kind of massive undertaking that's now going on, one of the probably more noteworthy, I think, ideas that's kind of come out during this process is the Google and Apple contact tracing initiative. Generally speaking, as I said earlier, contact tracing is done by way of in-person interviews, and given the sheer number of cases and how this is basically progressed across the country, that has sort of struggled to keep pace. So to that end, Google and Apple have basically introduced an API. It essentially leverages Bluetooth technology. What it does is your phone will actually log other phones that it will come in contact with, assuming that you and your device, I should say, and the other individuals, their phones that you come into contact with have some sort of similar COVID tracking app. And those logs, I guess from a privacy standpoint, the beneficial aspect of this is that those logs, generally speaking, will not include any identifying information. They'll use a random number ID that will often change frequently and get trashed after, I believe it's 14 days, which was the intent behind that is that's the incubation period for COVID-19. These Bluetooth trackers that is basically the foundation of this API is often used. It's not entirely foreign concept. It's used frequently by stores in order to measure crowd sizes, track how many people are coming and going. And so it does in fact provide some sort of a semblance of privacy. However, the interesting thing about it is that what's being introduced isn't actually, as I said before, isn't an app itself. It's rather an API. So each public health authority in the county or state, whether it's being done at a state or local level, would generally have to adopt this Apple and Google exposure notification API, and then they have to create an app. And states have gone through this differently. Some states have entirely kind of moved away from or just cast aside the whole Google Apple project. I believe Utah is actually one of them, where they actually purchased an application and they're not even using it. And I guess another interesting thing is that the number of states that have actually introduced this, or at least agreed to sign on to this Google Apple tracking system, basically, is very, very limited. It's I believe it's only 4 states as of this past week. And I think in terms of what this generally means for a privacy perspective, we probably need to keep an eye out for what you could say, or I guess what we'll call technology or privacy creep, which is, we're seeing this across the country and really across the globe already, where governments are kind of harnessing this technology and information that has been collected or utilized for COVID-related issues and is now being used for other purposes. And so that's kind of one particular area, but at least from what we've seen so far, the Google Apple initiative is commendable from a privacy standpoint. but it has not been widely adopted, and there's probably only about 4 states so far. We are tracking 3 different groups of legislators that have introduced various legislation in order to strengthen data security and privacy protection during this time. But at this point, it's a little too soon to know which one will actually get passed or what the final bill, if something is actually passed, will actually look like.
Thank you all for joining us. We hope that this has proven to be valuable for you. There are a series of these pop-up videos that we have done that are available on our YouTube channel. We look forward to seeing all of you, or hearing all of you, or however you want to say it, at the next session. And please stay safe and be well. Thank you for attending. Bye-bye.